Okay, so forgive me if this is a little bit unprepared. This is kind of, I heard, hey, there's time to share whatever you want. So I thought, cool, I can do that for 5 minutes. What I'm going to be sharing is a little bit of playing around with HTMX and Go. And so if you're like me, you're not a huge fan of having to work on the front end. You don't like to play around with JavaScript all too much if you can help it. And if you're also like me, you have to use an SPA framework like Vue or React. You're kind of boxed in there. And they solve a lot of problems. They provide a lot of front-end functionality and whatnot, but with them comes a lot of compilation, a big process of minifying, uglifying, and all that, and then uploading and so on and so forth. And it comes with some other costs like you lose SEO optimization when you have a giant SPA too. So, and for someone who likes just making web pages occasionally with raw HTML, CSS, this is kind of a bit of a fun tool that says, hey, we're just gonna add a little bit of functionality to HTMX. So you can actually install it with a small little script. I think it's 10K, so it's pretty small and cacheable. We'll add a little functionality to HTML that allows you to do some things that unfortunately the HTML spec doesn't allow for. So like linking is only done via A tags and submission is only done through forms. This says, well, what if you just have a button you wanted to do a post or a put or patch? This allows that. So you can, so it has some fun little tags like HX-post and some other things that say, hey, this button is clickable. When you do it, call this endpoint, and so on and so forth. And since we're trying to avoid having unnecessary JavaScript, well, unnecessary is an opinion, but we're trying to dedicate too much work and effort to developing a front end. We're trying to avoid, trying to keep things as much, what would you say? Trying not to have a dedicated front end framework to some sense. Let's just return the HTML that the page is going to render. So if this isn't your cup of tea, then this isn't the tool for you. But so I'm just going to read through this really quick and then go to a couple of fun little examples and then a little project that I was working on that I thought might be fun to share. So HTMX is a library that allows you to access modern browser features directly from HTML rather than using JavaScript. To understand HTMX, first let's look at an anchor tag. This anchor tag tells the browser, when the user clicks on this link, issue an HTTP GET request to the blog and load the response content into the browser window. So the notable difference is this isn't going to result in a redirect, which classically you would expect. So what will happen instead is this HTML will be replaced with whatever the response is. So that can be nice for dynamic content, but you don't want to have to have any JavaScript that says, oh, when you click this, re-render this, Vue, Angular, whatever it might be. You could just have an endpoint that says, oh, here's your HTML, load. You got to deal with potentially response times if you're serving content around the world and whatnot, but that could be really nice when you say, oh, it's just a simple bit of content. And likewise, with that in mind, considering the following bit of HTML, you have a button where when you click it, it should end up calling this endpoint /click, whatnot. And in this example also, it says, this is the content we're going to swap out. You got a CSS identifier, parent div, and we're going to replace the whole thing with this. Now, the parent div's not in the picture here, but that's the gist of it. So the tool, from what I understand, I'm just learning how to use it myself, tinkering around with it, but as I see it, it's a nice way for you to go avoid some of these heavy JavaScript tools that require all this setup and all this integration, and try to keep it as minimal as possible until you need the tool. Kind of like the database conversation we had earlier, where let's start with something simple and then go to something that scales when you need it. And so I'm just going to pull up an example. Hope I can do this with one hand. A little example that I made in the time that I had here. So here's one that I made offhand. I'm importing HTMX. All this page has there's a bit of content. You got an H1, a paragraph, and a button. And so I got this right. There we go. So I'm going to replace the content here. I didn't write any JavaScript. When I click this, the title's wrong. It's not going to actually fetch Google. I was trying to do that, but Core's got in the way. When I click that, it's going to replace it with the content there. No JavaScript involved, so that's the whole benefit of it. And what you'll notice is what that content was simply another HTML file. So here's the button that was rendered on the screen originally. When I clicked it, defined by this HTMX trigger tag, it fetched this HTML. You can actually see the request here. I got a little Python server running. It fetched that URL, and it swapped the entirety of the button with the outer HTML. And that's kind of cool too. If I get rid of that and redo it, instead it will by default replace the inner HTML. So now it's inside the button. It's kind of fun. So you can dedicate all sorts of little things like that. Pretty customizable, pretty fun. Where I think it's kind of fun to explore, and I've seen this some other people in the space tinkering around with this, is combining with Go templating. So you can create dynamic content. So your user has a session, possibly stored in the cookie, to some web token and whatnot. And then whenever you get a request, you simply look at the server state, the URL, query parameters and whatnot, and you generate the HTML on the fly. So I'll wrap this up with just my little example. Let me see if I get to that. Cool. So this is a little page I've been tinkering with a bit. So I'm just gonna navigate to a page here, and I haven't actually built any game, but as part of it, what you got here is, okay, I'm gonna actually jump into a game. It's not fully set up or anything. This is based on a board game called Agricola. If you're a fan of it, that's awesome. But otherwise, here's a little example that I have of how you would go about doing it. If it's not your kind of thing, then you know. What I have here is a bit of content here that's based on the user at hand. So this is a user, my wife added crazy cougar something or other. And these are some playing cards that the player has. And this HTML here, if I can actually load it up, one sec. Is dynamically fetched every time I click this link. So let me do a quick refresh here. There we go. Cool. So when I click this link, this does a get on a specific endpoint that retrieves this HTML, returns it back, and here's actually a little response there. There's the raw HTML. You see that now it's got the links are at the bottom. This one's clickable because it has an href, and there's the stuff too. If I click previous, it'll fetch it again on the previous page. And yeah, I guess that's that. Try to keep it at that length. And awesome. Thanks for letting me share.